Good afternoon and welcome to ScootTalks Sports episode 8. Thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate the time that you spend with me each and every episode. We're back with another episode Friday. It took a while to get here, I feel like, this week. I don't know what everybody else's week was like, but it was certainly hectic around our house. Little man's getting older, a lot less sleep, a lot more walking. It's been pretty wild. So I'm looking forward to sitting back and having a good conversation with a couple of great guys today. So if you haven't seen the tweets, you haven't seen the updates today, as always, this is an opportunity for me to pick the brains of some of the more intelligent, experienced, and influential people throughout Canadian sports, as well as sports around the world. But we do try to focus a little bit on the Canadian Premier League and Canadian soccer. And with that in mind, our first guest today is Tristan D'Amours. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. My Western English is probably ruining it. But Tristan D'Amours is a sports journalist with the MLS. He's a Canadian press sports journalist as well. He does some broadcasting for McGill Athletics, and as well as is a piece on some radio and podcasts, including TSN 690 and the Scrum podcast. You can find him on Twitter and a lot of other places. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and bring in Tristan, and we'll kick the show off here. Tristan, how are you? Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today.
I'm doing well. Thanks for the invite. And you did say it right. Silent S. So, yeah.
I actually went on Forvo. I will admit it. I went on Forvo because I'm always paranoid that I'm going to be that guy out west in Canada who just absolutely butchers a name, and it just kind of fits the what do you call it, the reputation we have out here for not necessarily being as linguistically open as other areas of the country. So I'm glad that I nailed it. That's good to hear. Thank you for being here. Really a great opportunity. For those who don't know, a lot of the time when I want to bring on a guest, it's a shot in the dark, and Tristan is someone that I've read a lot of his articles. I've watched his takes, his commentary, and his ability to keep us up to date on kind of what's going on in the Montreal scene. And for somebody who lives out in Winnipeg, it's been a learning experience, and it's one of the reasons I've brought you on today. Is I really wanted to be able to pick your brain a little bit, because I don't think folks out west, especially in Winnipeg, we don't talk a lot about Montreal sports unless the Canadian, for the most part. I don't think a lot of folks out here follow or we're up to date on the brand change, even with the impact to CF Montreal. So kind of setting the table on what we'd like to discuss, and I've babbled away here. So thanks, Christian, for giving me a moment to set the table.
I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, thanks for that.
So the first thing I kind of wanted to chat a little bit about is I always like to get to know folks a little bit. I mean, obviously there's the stories you're covering, there's all the different places that you have access to, but I think there's something really intriguing about finding where folks have found their niche or found their career, or what kind of track took them that place. And I find it's quite often not A to B type situation. It's usually A to Z to R to T, and then maybe back to B before you find your way. Let's start off with this. What was your first memory of sports, Tristan? What was the first time you remember getting involved or having a memory of a sport?
Well, it's interesting because I was an athlete before being a journalist. I was a swimmer for most of my life before I ended up going to journalism school. And funny enough, I got into swimming because my parents figured out that I was afraid of water, and they didn't want to get me afraid of water. And one memory that I personally don't remember, but my parents keep telling me, is about how I almost drowned. And it was like some water park experience or something. And, a split second and the kids at the bottom of the pool type situation, and, can't get yourself out. And maybe that's why I was afraid of water. And they instantly got me into recreational swimming. And then, like the neighborhood pool and the neighborhood swimming team coach just happened to be there and was like, oh, that kid, he's pretty good. So it got me into this. And I was always a racing fan. I used to be a big NASCAR Formula One kind of guy. I used to wake up early and watch that with my parents. And we didn't have the money to do auto racing. So swimming is essentially racing. So that's what kept me doing that for, up until I was 21, 22.
So that was a long time that you ended up swimming then. That's really, really wild. That's Oh, 20 years of swimming. What did you primarily do when you swam? Like, was this a particular stroke that you were in, a particular type of race?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a butterfly specialist, and then unfortunately, I tore my pectoral muscle right here, and it still has like I still got trouble with that, so I transitioned into freestyle. And yeah, to make the long, I mean, I'm assuming you're probably going to talk. We're going to talk about journalism, but uh, there was a time where I had to make the decision to either swim at university level at Université du Québec in Trois-Rivières, or to go to Concordia University in journalism. And journalism was always something I wanted to do. So I ended up leaving the thing that I really loved doing for most of my life and doing the other thing that I loved doing, which was to do journalism. And yeah, those are the types of decisions that you need to, you need to really sit back and think about, and that like will kind of rule the rest of your life. And that was something that I had to do.
What a crossroads! Hey, that opportunity to go kind of two different directions. Do you ever wish you're able to cover more swimming events? I know that you do
Oh
quite a
my
lot of
god. Yes,
of
absolutely. I definitely wish I could. I mean, I would love to. I mean, the Olympics is one thing, but there's a new league now in swimming called the International Swimming League, which like a couple of big time swimmers are in there, and there's some Canadians as well. Brent Hayden is in there. He's a pretty well known swimmer. Katie Moss is in there as well. Yeah. So I mean, I wish I could. It's still in its infancy, but yeah, if I were to cover the Olympics, for sure, swimming is like the top of my bucket list for sure.
well, lots of time left. I imagine it could be something that happens in the future, right? It's one of those things. It's I always talk to folks who've gone into journalism. It's quite rare that folks end up landing exactly in the area of where they kind of had all of their interest, right? I had a buddy who ended up going into journalism, and he can remember his first assignment was curling. And he wasn't a big fan of curling. Out here we get it's normal, it's part of everyday life. But to us, it's sort of like something that our grandma and grandpa were really, really into. And 22, 23-year-old in school is like, it's not 100% my thing. But that being said, fell in love with the sport, fell in love with the characters, fell in love with everyone he was interviewing,
Hmm.
and now he's a nut for it. He's one of those people you walk through the house and every TV is on curling, so as he wanders through the house he never misses a shot.
Beautiful.
But um
I keep saying I had to do something like that as well to try and impress my editor when I was in student media, to try and make good graces. And I don't know if you know Julian McKenzie, who now works at the Athletic. He was my editor back then, and he absolutely needed someone to cover rugby, and I knew nothing about rugby. So I think I had 2 days to prep, and I ended up like scanning the entire rules and regulations of rugby, had it in one of those like notepads,
yeah.
uh, and I went away and I just tried to do my best to cover rugby. And to this day, it's still the only championship that I've ever covered, because the Concordia Stingers rugby team, the men's rugby team, ended up winning against McGill. It was like a huge emotional game, and it's still, I mean, I've been in journalism for 7 years now, 8 years, still the only championship I've ever covered.
You know what? It's funny. It's funny as that's the only championship. At the same time, it's like what a cool opportunity between two. I would assume if it's anything like Quebec American style football, the rivalries between those schools would probably be relatively intense. I'd assume.
Yes, absolutely. There's a big Concordia and McGill, and there's also l'Université de Montréal, de Carabin, and the Rouge et Or in Laval. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal, especially when the Carabin and the Rouge et Or play together, because they're there to win, right? And like the
Yeah.
Rouge et Or, they take it so seriously. I have friends that played for the Rouge et Or, whether it's football, swimming, soccer, volleyball. You're treated like a king over there. You're royalty, you're family when you're with the Rouge et Or. They love you. Like that's the
That's
the
awesome.
cool aspect of college sports, that people don't really get to see. And yeah, that's what I find great about college sports here.
Yeah, and I think it's something that I think that as I've gotten into football and soccer, let's say, I've noticed that there's actually a load of free content coming out of U Sports and a load of different like CIS and
Mm-hmm.
collegiate type sports that are available to watch, and they're good quality. It's actually great to watch, and I don't think as many people as we would love to see know about these options in terms of sports and being
No.
able to watch some of this local kids play and at a very high level. So it's something that's really cool to be able to
And
touch
frankly,
on.
on that level, I think for college soccer, because I have the great chance and the great opportunity to do play by play now for McGill's men's soccer team, and I do color commentary with my colleague Mo Khan for women's soccer. And I covered college soccer 7 years ago when I was doing student media, and like, to be honest, the level went up.
Mm-hmm.
They really raised that bar. So yeah, I mean, most of it is readily available. Uh, McGill has a paid subscription service now, so like you have to pay to watch all of their Redbirds and the Martlets, all of the sports. But also, I love how it just like there's a lot of great journalists that
Mm-hmm.
start by covering college sports. It allows for that as well. That's another thing. I mean, I'm not gonna say that I'm the best play-by-play person because I got like literally 2 games under the belt. So it allows for me to raise my game, and then potentially maybe that wasn't something I was looking at per se, was doing play-by-play. I always found myself more as a writer, but it's another thing that I can have fun with, and it's another opportunity maybe later on to do something.
Yeah, I mean, that's the very cool part too. Is that even during the Olympics, I saw a lot of folks covering the Olympics because they were covering U Sports and some of the amateur
Absolutely.
sports that went there. And I was like, these are great journalists. I got to follow them. One of that comes to mind right off the top of my head is Ben. I want to say his last name is Stein or Stein. I can't remember.
Yes.
He he was
Shout out
he
to Ben. Yeah.
he was killing it during the Olympics. I don't know where he slept. I don't understand where he got rest during that time, but he was absolutely nailing it. And then linking it back to, hey, here's where they play normally. Here's where they're available to see when they're in Canada. Because, as awesome as the Olympics are, we see all these great athletes, and then we sort of turn off until the next major event
Mm-hmm.
that they might be part of. And I think, there could be, it's nice to see those connections being put together. So for sure. Looping back a little bit back to you're growing up, you're a swimmer. Was it if that was your favorite sport, did you have a favorite swimmer or someone that you looked up to in that sport, or was it an athlete that was maybe outside of swimming?
Well, should I? I mean, Michael Phelps. Like, it's easy, but like the dude is crazy. Like
Yeah.
he inspired so many people. I mean, there's a lot of Canadian swimmers that I got to know from being in training camps with, or swimming in like amazing pools with. I mean, there's a Swimming Canada has a pool at the I don't know if you're familiar with Parc Jean Drapeau and the island where the Formula One race is.
A little
There's
bit.
a pool there because Montreal hosted the Aquatics World Championships in 2005, and the pool is still there. And there's 2 different pools. One is anyone can go, and the other one has a big sign that says athletes only. And I swear to God, the feeling of crossing that path that says athletes only is really dope. It's really dope. I'm not gonna lie. But I from being there, from training with some of these people. I mean, Catherine Savard, who just went to the Olympics, it comes to mind. There's a trolley of different people, but Michael Phelps, what he did for this sport is incredible. I don't think an athlete brought that much to a sport than more than Michael Phelps in the last 30 years. I have this debate with my colleague Julian McKenzie, who I've shouted out twice now.
Got to.
Anyway,
Got to.
but he believes it's Usain Bolt, and he's got a point. But I'll never let go that it's Michael Phelps. This man is just what he brought is incredible.
That's a very intriguing debate, and there's really good arguments for both sides. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
one of those things where it's like, if I look at Michael Phelps and I think about where he put the sport in front of a lot of people who would have never seen it. And at the
absolutely.
same thing, Usain Bolt's a guy who people really fell in love with. They liked who he was as well as what he did. And there's a sport where, yeah, I think a lot of people watch the 100 and some of those short distance things, but there's characters that really drive people to a sport. And Usain Bolt certainly was one of them, especially when he went and tried to play soccer in Australia, which was quite interesting.
Yeah.
What a pace merchant that guy would be. Hey, just run.
Yeah, yeah, and then there was the will he won't he sign with Manchester United, and that
Right.
was the whole thing. Yeah.
That got out of control. In retrospect, that got out of control pretty quickly. It was just like, yeah, he's very fast, guys, but there's a lot of other things that he
Mm.
might need to learn. And I'm not trying to say, Usain, if you're listening, I know you're always tuning in, but you're a very good runner.
Yeah, yeah, he's got that sorted, that's for sure.
Exactly. So sports journalism, we talked a little bit about how you made that choice, kind of like, do I want to continue on making swimming the dream, or do I want to jump into sports journalism, something that I've always been, considering? Were you dabbling a little bit in journalism? Were you doing any writing, or were you one of those people who maybe, played a video game with the sound off and did the play-by-play while you were playing it? Was there anything that you were interested in before you made that decision?
Well, there was a bit of that. There was always I'm someone that my mind never really stops. And yeah, sometimes for the best, sometimes not. But I remember when I would just go like play hockey outside, just like the classic, like I'm by myself with a net, and I would just like invent like random storylines for myself. I would play like FIFA career mode and like sign players solely based on the story.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like I'm a Canadian manager and I'm like, managing Celtic Football Club and I sign a Canadian just for the storyline or
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I always had the story and the headline like in my mind. I never really did any sort of article writing beforehand. I wasn't one of those like I was covering like a peewee hockey team at 12 years old. I never really got to that because there was a lot on my plate anyway because I was training a lot and then school, and then there's the slight thing where I'm a francophone. My first language is French, but I did my schooling in English, so I had to grow up, try to be like a normal kid, and also learning English at the same time as doing all of the other things a kid needs to do. So it was very difficult. I had that there were a lot of transition periods to do a lot of tough love learning type stuff. So I never really got to dabble into that, but like I remember watching Canadians hockey as a kid, loving what Pierre Houd and Yvon Pedneau would do on RDS, and then watching the classic, watching Trade Deadline and trying to skip school and watch Trade Deadline and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then telling myself that I would really want to do that, and then like my parents subscribed to La Presse, and then very quickly got tired of it and then just kept it because I was the one reading it. So, and of course reading the sports section. So I always knew I wanted to do something like that. And then when I saw that opportunity of, I'm someone that when I do something, I'm going to do it like fully. So when I got the opportunity to, when I signed up for journalism school and I saw that I was getting in, I was like, okay, this is the opportunity. If I'm not taking the chance now, I'm never going to. So let's just go at it and try and see if it works out. And, thankfully it worked out. I feel like I've gotten, quite a few bylines under my belt. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's that's what I tell most people is just like, if you actually want to do it, like give yourself the opportunity to, and because that's the thing, right? You never know who's listening, you never know who's reading, and some of the opportunities I've gotten, uh like references, or like, oh, someone gave me your name. Are you interested in doing this? Sometimes it's not necessarily like friends or people that I like know from, from day to day. It's like some people that saw me doing this and they're like, oh yeah, you're that guy, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that the way the world works sometimes, especially with the social media we see nowadays. You never know where or how or who is looking at some of your content, and sometimes it's somebody from Winnipeg sending you a DM inviting you to a podcast you've never heard of in your entire life. But it's what I've found too, and I maybe this is a little bit off topic, but what I've found too is that within the realm of journalists, sports journalism, there seems to be such an appetite for cooperation and interest in being able to help each other out and jump into each other's work or provide something for somebody else. And it's really something that's quite refreshing, because I came from my professional world was marketing, project management, very boring stuff, and there's none of that. I don't go to another project manager and go, hey, how would you approach this problem? That's not something we do. Whereas I found in conversations with Alex from out west, there just seems to be this kind of network of people who see it the same way and are willing to help each other out. And it's just such a positive vibe. Really just a comment from my side on this point. But you mentioned that you chose to go in. This is something I really find interesting. You mentioned you chose to go in and learn journalism in English instead of French, which was your first language. What went into making that decision? I'm curious. Is that just because ultimately in North America, most media is English, or was it something that you decided for another reason?
Oh no, it was definitely not a choice. I did my schooling from elementary all the way to college in English.
Oh, okay.
There and I wish I knew exactly why, because there's a law in Quebec that if you're not an anglophone, you need to go to French school, and I
Mm-hmm.
got to forego that. And I believe it's like some family lineage, but my family is not is not an English speaking family. I speak French with my parents, so. But I got that opportunity to go there. It wasn't my choice. They
Okay.
dropped me off first day, and I felt like I was on Mars. I'm not gonna lie, it was not. It was not easy, but my writing is a bit better in English than it is in French, because force of nature. I've done that more. I wish I could do it more in French. I've had opportunities where I could. I wrote a few articles for the Canadian Premier League website in French when it first
Mm-hmm.
started up, and that was great. But most of my writing, most of what I'm known for, which is very weird, because in Montreal there's this very I don't know if you're familiar with the two solitudes aspect, but a lot of people around here think that I'm an anglophone. Because I don't have an accent, because I was peer pressured into not having one. So
It's something that I hesitate to ask those questions, because I know language is something of a very important topic in Quebec, and I certainly don't want to minimize it. But I just find it very interesting, right? That it's something that I found striking whenever I hear you speak, is that you don't come across as somebody who spoke French first, but then when you speak French, it's absolutely clear, that was your original language. And it's very cool, because it is, as somebody who lives out west, I confess, when I had the chance to live and work in Quebec for about 6 weeks when I was in university, and within a few weeks, the language came around. My grade 10 French
Mhm.
from out west got me through. But it's something that I think, especially as a son now, I have a son now, I'm thinking, do I want to do, and this is kind of funny because you had the opposite experience. I'm sitting here, and me and my wife are thinking, do we want to put my kid directly into French immersion? Because the idea of, from a job standpoint, and also from just being a Canadian and being able to embrace both sides of the coin, I just thought I missed out on something there, especially when I got into being able to travel out into Quebec and looking at some of those jobs that existed. You did need to be bilingual, and my grade 10 French wasn't gonna cut it. So I appreciate you allowing me to kind of dive into that, because it is interesting, and likely a little bit unexpected. I think that at some point, especially for folks who are listening overseas in UK, like, what do you mean you have to kind of choose which language at a young age, right? It's a very unique
Yeah.
part of Quebec.
Although I gotta say, I have kind of a Brad Friedel syndrome where, so I went to high school in in Montreal's Italian neighborhood. So whenever I'm around Italians, I start sounding Italian, and people start asking me. For the longest time, people actually asked me where from Italy I was from, which is interesting from like a very Franco-Quebecois, like what are you like? My name is D'Amours. Like, what are you talking about?
Come on, now you saw the name.
Like, like, but yeah. So but it's weird, and but yeah, I really, in hindsight, when I was a kid, I resented my parents. I was like, what the hell are you getting me into? But in hindsight, it's being able to freely speak without any reservation both languages is like an absolute skill. I appreciate every second of it, and I try to learn more. I've been trying to learn Spanish, and I try to, I can understand it, I can read it a bit. So that to me, learning languages to me is an absolute skill. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and especially I think, as a journalist, it allows you to have more casual conversations with folks, especially if it's in their own language too, right? I think that's something that's often forgot, that a lot of English language, you're speaking to someone who's not their English is not their first language. I always think of Bielsa with Leeds, who insists on having his translator there, even though he can probably speak English. He realizes that the way he's going to respond may not line up with what he's actually trying to say, so he continues to have that translator. It's just very interesting. Last question on kind of your sports journalism come up, let's say. What was your first job that you can remember? Now, obviously, you probably would have done some work when you were in school, but what was your kind of first where you felt like, I'm in the industry now, I'm part of this, let's go?
Well, I kind of have two answers, because one of it was thanks to student media, I got to cover the 2 years of the Montreal Impact Academy team. Well, not academy, but reserve team, which was called FC Montreal. They played in USL, and that's how I got into soccer. USL, like old school Montreal Impact against the old school USLs, like the Rochester Rhinos, the Charleston Battery, the Richmond Kickers. Like, that's my jam. Like, that's what I absolutely love. And when I saw they were coming back, I knew I had, from the rugby thing, I knew I had the faith in my editors had faith in me, and I was like, okay, like, hear me out. Can I beat right for this team? And they were like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So that's what got me known, and then the actual like non like university pays me type thing has to be Pro Soccer USA, which was for those who don't know, it was a startup venture that the Orlando Sentinel and the Chicago Tribune Publishing Company started, because they saw a hole in the market for soccer coverage, and like mainly MLS, NWSL, and bit of USL and stuff like that, US national team. And so they started a website where they had one correspondent from every market around MLS, and it was damn, I can't remember their name. Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, so a writer left, and they knew me, so they vouched for me to Alicia Rose Delgado, who was the EIC of that back in the day, and now she's doing the new USA Today Sports Plus venture, which is looking really dope. They do NFL stuff. It's great. And that got me to cover so many things. I got to be a proper Montreal Impact beat writer. I would go to training every day and like file from training. I got to, I pretty much was the first one to say that Yuka Raitala was the captain of the Impact. Like, all of those stuff. I got to cover the men's national team in Toronto. I got to like go to another city, write, and get paid for it. Like, that was it was literally living the dream. To me, it was great. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the venture ended up not working out, and then the Sentinel the Tribune got sold, and that whole it ended up kind of going afloat. But that I one of the first like things where I was looking at myself being like, okay, this is for real. This is really this is the thing. This is the beat writing thing.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's just unfortunate the pandemic has had such an effect on
Yeah.
so many things throughout the entire world. It's one of those things where we're always going to say, things in this, and then the pandemic, and then after this is what I did, right? It's what a weird story for my kid. I always like to say, we always hear those stories of parents saying, "Oh, I had to walk uphill in -40 both ways to school." I'm like, we have our own set of stories now where you can just say the whole world was on fire.
Yeah.
Good transition. I thought we could talk a little bit about CF Montreal, given that we just talked a little bit how you got into covering, their B-side, their reserve team, which I actually didn't know about. That's very cool that they were playing in the
a
US.
lot of CanPL players are former FC Montreal graduates.
That's so cool. And before we even get
And
into CF
Masta
Montreal,
Cacher, the Valor FC player, he played for FC Montreal.
I was just going to say, I was like, I'm pretty sure he had a connection to that club, but I'd have to go double check. Yeah. I'm so bad. I mix people's histories sometimes, and then I say something like, that's another player on the same team. Like, okay, sorry. This is why I'm not a journalist. But thinking quickly about the Canadian Premier League before we jump into CF Montreal, because you did mention it, is it not sort of a glaring hole in the league that there isn't a Quebec team? Like,
absolutely.
It's not a national league until there's a team in Quebec, in my opinion. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, absolutely. They in their first in like year 0, when they had the open trials, there was an open trial in Montreal, and that was the only city that didn't have a team. Like, I think it's always been a plan. It's absolutely always been a plan for there to be a team. I feel like we're, I'm not in the I don't know any inside info of like what's going on right now with this, because there's been so much contradictory information in the past like few years, and I'm not in the in the know as much as I used to be. But I think we're a bit closer to a team in Quebec City than we are to a team in the Montreal region. But I definitely think there's place for a team in the Montreal region, because as long as I think they have to do completely different than what CF Montreal does. I'm not sure what that would mean, but I think there's definitely a place there. And the relevancy in Montreal, which is, and in Quebec, which is, one of the biggest provinces in this country, it won't be as relevant as it is. I'm invited, on the radio once in a while to talk about what's going on with the CPL, because there's a lot of Quebecois in there, but it won't have as much relevancy until we have a team here. Yeah. It's plain and simple.
Yeah, absolutely. So that being said, let's talk about the team that is there in the Montreal area and recently rebranded. And this was a little bit of I know you've probably talked about this a load. We won't go super deep into it, but I wanted to just touch on it because folks who follow this podcast, most of them are overseas. Some of them are within Canada, but I don't think people realize what this rebrand caused and sort of the conflict that's currently brewing or is continuing to brew between the club and its supporters. Could we talk first about why, or at least the argument that the ownership had in terms of doing this club name rebrand from the Montreal Impact to CF Montreal?
I think it's an interesting question, because at first, when the Impact moved into MLS, they said that they were going to keep their image, and I feel like it probably would have been a better idea to make it then than to make it now. But I think it all comes down to the change in not ownership, but how the change in the higher ups, I should say. Joey Saputo, who was the owner, he's the team that essentially revived the Impact, because the Impact was on the verge of bankruptcy, if not bankrupt, brought them back as a non-profit, and then built it up, constructing Saputo Stadium, and then getting into MLS. Montreal owes a huge debt of gratitude to Joey Saputo, but he was also the club president at the same time. So what ended up happening was there came a time where it became almost a necessity for him to take a step back, especially since he had just acquired FC Bologna in Serie A. And in came Kevin Gilmore, who is an experienced business club president. Like, he was with AEG when they had the Galaxy, when they had the Dynamo, and he did a lot of different things in terms of club management. He led the Anaheim Ducks in rebranding from the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim to the Anaheim Ducks. Then he went over to the Canadiens and was a big big proponent, and he ended up putting forward this new era of the Canadiens with the Club 1909 kind of fidelity program type deal. So he went to different places and implemented different things, and he ended up succeeding to Saputo in the club presidency at the Impact, wanting to bring a better he wanted to bring a better impact to the Impact. Essentially, he wanted the club to be a bigger club than what it is, and what he kept saying when he came in is, we're in a big city, we should act as a big city club. And then the rebrand happened a few months later, to the surprise of a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people expected that, and it caught a lot of people by surprise. And the rebrand, wasn't well received by a lot of people, and they came in with I guess, for lack of a better word, a blander name. Like, there wasn't a nickname, and that was the one thing, because they had when they presented it in front of everybody in that big digital conference and whatnot. I remember being there, and being virtually there, and they had all of these different almost like samples of different things that they wanted to bring. And the guy who ended up the guy who created all this, Kevin, no, I don't remember his name, but if you followed this, Justin Kingsley. There you go. They had CFMTL, which ended up being the hashtag, and then they had CFM, and then they had CF Montreal, and then they had Club de Foot Montreal, which we use less now. That's not a thing. Even the Twitter account went from Club de Foot Montréal to CF Montreal. People didn't really like foot as Club de Foot, or there was a lot of different things, and it felt like they came at it without necessarily knowing what it was. And I remember a few people asking, so what is the new nickname? So are we not saying Impact anymore? And then they were like, well, we can still say Impact. People will call it whatever they call it. But then they had merch that said CFM and not really CFMTL. So it felt like they kind of chose something while saying that they'll organically choose it. And it was a rebrand without necessarily having any sort of input. So it wasn't that organic. And then, the CF as opposed to FC was French as opposed to English, because that's another thing you need to think about in Montreal. Yep. So a lot of it was it felt kind of loose in terms of what a lot of people were left asking a lot of questions, and then there were the ultras, but that's a supporters group. That's that's a whole other thing. But the supporters, because over here, and I don't know if it's the same thing in Winnipeg with Valor, is in Montreal, it's a Canadiens town, right?
Hmm.
It's a Habs thing. You turn to sports radio, 9 times out of 10, you're going to hear Canadians talk for good reason, because that's what people want to hear.
Yeah.
And the people that liked the impact they loved the impact so much so that they became kind of frustrated with mainstream media because they didn't talk about it enough. So it was a small amount of people in the grand scheme of Montreal that were only talking about their soccer team. And so it became like almost toxic because they kept saying, well, we can still say the impact, but because of this, there was such an intense debate on the name that impact, the word itself, became taboo almost. And it felt like if you were saying impact as opposed to CF, and if you were saying CF as opposed to impact, you took a position.
Mm.
And so that's been brewing for 6 months, and unfortunately, people will say the pandemic did cost a bit of that as well, but there wasn't a lot of discussion between management and ownership and the fans. So it became kind of like a crock pot. Like the pressure kept building up, and obviously the how can I say, the not having home games was a whole thing too. So the first few home games, well, of course, the chants were still Impact and not CF. We didn't hear any CF chants as of now, and so there. It's still very much a contentious issue.
Yeah.
6 months and so after the fact, and but that's what it was, right? It was always going to be that. When you change something, people are always refractory to change, but I think a lot of people were disappointed towards ownership. I don't think I've ever felt any animosity towards the head coach or the players.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any animosity to that. The supporters are still supporting the team. It's just the ownership that made those changes. There's still some debate on that front, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because what we've seen is it doesn't, in the way that I've read it from the coverage that I've seen, including some of your articles, is around, it's really a conversation between the supporters and the executives, the team, the staff. They're sort of caught in the middle. They're just wanting to play the game and be able to play the game and be fairly well supported. It's just intriguing because if I tap into my little bit of a marketing background, it just seems like, and this is going to sound very project managey, but it's a reality is they didn't consult with their stakeholders. They didn't have a conversation with everyone that was going to be impacted by, and there I am using that word, it's a terrible pun, who was going to be, either frustrated or happy with this change. It didn't do enough. And maybe it seems like that bland kind of, they were going to put it out and see how people just kind of integrated it or took it in or kind of ran with it. It just seems a little bit, like you said, it just felt light. It just felt like is like we could be whatever you guys think, but at the same time, we've already printed shirts that have this on it. So
yeah, it was essentially it was very contradictory, and I think and yeah, there was a lot of different things. I remember when we recorded a Scrum episode a few days after, and one of the biggest contradictory to me was how Justin Kingsley, who was explaining, he was at the forefront really explaining the creative process, said that the one of the influences was St. Pauli Football Club, which for the global football fans know that it's a very activist, a very left-leaning type of club that is very close to its values. And then when they tried to explain the colors, which the color black on the jersey is called Impact Black, and one of the reasons for the color was to be in the black, which is to make money, which is incredibly like a stark difference from what St. Pauli stands for. And like, so there was a lot of contradictories to a lot of people. I remember, and it was very fiery in February, March. A lot of people were against it, and were like slowly as the team is playing, and they're playing pretty well, which is good for the grand scheme of things, because I believe if they were the last team in MLS right now, it would be, there would be no positives to attach yourself to. But you can really sense it. Like on Twitter, and like most of my timeline is about IMFC/CFMTL Twitter. So you see it all the time. Anytime there's a reference to Gilmore, or any, there's easy jokes, easy like mentions of there's all you see it, a lot of Gilmore out, a lot of rebrand mentions, like tongue in cheek, like why are you saying this or that? Like you see it a lot. So it's still very much there. And like a lot of people will say, well, calm down. Like, what's the whole point? Like, stop mentioning this. But it's what you see. Like, it's still visible. You still hear impact chants, and now the club took an even stronger position with banning Section 132, where the ultras were, and then not to say that it was fully because of the rebrand. There were things with especially in the last game against Toronto. I was told, I wasn't there, so I haven't said anything about this because I literally wasn't there. I was covering the Alouettes game, which happened at the same time. So I can't really talk about that, but they mention a lot of that. And then like the other game, there was a plane flying over Stade Saputo that said, bring back the Ultras, bring back 132. Like it was, like we're not hearing the end of this until the end of the season. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's really interesting, and I appreciate you taking, sharing what you have seen, and I remember your tweets that day, because you were like, I'm at the Alouette game, so I can't mention what's going on, but I'm trying to keep my eye also on kind of what was happening, right? And that must be tough, where you're at an event, you're covering that event, but at the same time something is happening with a team that you also cover. It must be just like, I need 80 phones in front of me.
And I was getting roasted by everybody for not being at that game. I heard it all.
It's too bad. Here, with a couple minutes left, Tristan, again, big thank you for jumping in. We've run out of time. I think what we'll do is we'll probably bring you on maybe closer to the MLS season again, if you're interested, and we can chat about how the team is playing. We got into a lot about your career, as well as the politics of some of that rebrand change, which was really, really interesting, and I appreciate your time. Before we let you go, I'm curious, where can people find you these days? Obviously, I've mentioned you're a sports journalist for MLS. You're working with the Canadian Press Sports, as well as a broadcaster for McGill. Where else can people get connected with you? Or is it just Twitter is the best way to go? Let us know how you'd prefer to be found.
Yeah, definitely Twitter is the best way to go. That's where I'll share pretty much whatever I'm up to. MLSsoccer.com. And then the Canadian Press, that's where I do Alouettes football, and maybe more. I can't announce anything yet, but maybe a little more.
Keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you have a wide scope, if you're not just a soccer fan. Yeah. But the McGill, which is a really cool little thing that just happened following the men's and women's soccer team. So that's going to be interesting. They have a really nice young team with former MLS Academy players and former PSG Academy player. That's an interesting one. That's cool. That's fun. So that's what I'm up to these days.
Well, thank you so much, Tristan. Really do appreciate it. You guys get out there, give this guy a follow. He's really doing some great work. He's keeping us connected out west with what's going on in Quebec. Really do appreciate your time, Tristan, and have a great rest of your Friday.
Thank you, and thanks to the comments. Appreciate all of them.
Okay, thank you very much. Talk soon. That was Tristan D'Amours. He is a writer, journalist with MLS.com, as well as someone who does a lot of coverage within the Montreal area, as well as Quebec. Thank you so much for him joining us today. Fantastic. Next guest is Ryan Davis. Ryan Davis is a broadcaster that I had the chance to hear during the World Cup qualifiers, and I was so impressed with his coverage and his ability to call a game. I thought, why not reach out, give him a message, and see if he'd be interested in coming on and talk a little bit about his career, his love of sports, And without any further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Ryan. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show. This is a real honor. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't know about an honor, but I do appreciate you having you on. It's a quirky little podcast out of Winnipeg, central spot in North America, as far away as you can be from the beautiful sunny Florida, as I'm sure you're enjoying right now.
Well, just a quick rundown. I have family ties in Canada. I have my mother's brother, my uncle. He lives in New Brunswick with his kids, and then I have very, very close friends of mine. They live just south of Toronto. Could you remind me of a town? Is it, I can't remember the name of the town, but just south of Toronto. And and our intent is to come up to Canada this year. So not only I have family ties, I can't wait to come and visit Canada.
Hey, you know what? It's one of those great things. It's like out here in Winnipeg, I'm pretty far removed from Toronto, but one of those places that we constantly love to fly into, grab some food, see some events, and then fly back home. You'll love it. You'll love it. And in terms of small towns around Toronto, I could name a billion. To me, it's one of those places that when I drive through, coming out from the prairies where our cities are a little bit smaller, it never feels like the city never ends. The sign keeps changing of what town you're in, but just seems like the same city. But thank you very much for joining us, Ryan.
Yes.
Thought it would be great to have you on. Obviously, after seeing you on One Soccer, I'm not sure if you knew all the networks you were on where you were doing that coverage, but there was some conversation on Twitter about how impressed we were with your coverage that night. And it was something...
so much. I didn't get that feedback. It was a good game. It was a really good game. I really enjoyed calling it. And seeing the U.S. come back was impressive. I thought they were stumbling before that game. The build up to that game, they were really kind of sputtering, not firing on all cylinders. And let's be honest, Honduras allowed them to come right back in that game. So it was fun to call just because one team came back on the other. That was it.
You love a game where there's a little bit of action, a little bit of a storyline or intensity that comes through, right?
Yeah, exactly. It makes it a lot easier to call the game for sure.
Yeah. So let's get to know you a little bit, Ryan, if you don't mind. I wouldn't mind asking you a few questions just to get to know where your love of sports started. Where did you grow up? Obviously, it wasn't in Florida, I'm guessing, but where did you grow up, and what was your first memory of sports?
I was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago. My dad was a professional cricket player. He played for the West Indies, which is a pretty big deal in the cricketing circles. So his love of sports really just came down on me. My whole entire family, which is all his brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, are huge sports fans. And so that eventually just came into my household, and I grew up in a household where sport was primary number one. So I started off playing table tennis, and I was actually the junior champion of Trinidad and Tobago in table tennis to start with when I was about 7, going up to about 13. And during that time, I was playing cricket and football, soccer, and I just love sports. Either I was watching it on the TV or I was playing it in the yard with friends. So it was nonstop for me growing up.
That's quite amazing. I had no idea that you had a connection to a world-class cricket player. That is very cool. So you really didn't have much choice. I feel like this is going to be the sense for my son. He's only about 14 months, but I feel like I'm just going to basically dump sports on top of him. So you played table tennis as your first kind of choice. What got you into table tennis?
Well, my dad, again, he's so savvy when it comes to sports that table tennis is such an interactive game. It's so fast. So if you introduce it to a youngster, somebody who's young, boy or girl, doesn't matter, because it's so quick and the person who's playing the game is constantly connected, there's no boredom. So it's so easy to get into at that age. And the speed of play translates to other sports. So following...
Oh, sorry, I think your mic just cut out.
That was my got a call. So following a little ball makes it easier to follow a bigger ball in a different sport, soccer or cricket or whatever. So that's what really kind of set the stage for me, playing table tennis, and that sort of launched everything after that.
That's very cool. I'll tell you honestly, that was not the sport that I expected you to say you got into first. That is very cool though. And I think it was
Sure.
just recently there was during the Paralympic Games, there was a guy who kind of went viral playing table tennis. I think he had amputee of some sort. So he had one arm and he was unbelievable at it. It was incredible
Yeah,
to see.
yeah. It's an amazing sport to begin with, and it has a real tight knit community. Like if you ever come across somebody who plays table tennis in Canada, I'm sure they can talk a lot about their community there.
Yeah, I'll have to put it on my list and bring somebody in
Do it.
from Table Tennis Canada. It's something I gotta learn about. So growing up playing table tennis, your father's a cricket player. What was your favorite sport to watch or to follow? Was it those sports or was it something else?
No, it was definitely football, soccer. Um, it was just it's so easy on the eyes, and I guess that's why they call it the beautiful game. It's so easy to follow, to watch, and to emulate. So you would watch whatever you see on English football or English soccer on a Saturday, and you run outside in the yard or at a friend's house and try exactly what you just saw minutes ago. So I began watching in the 80s. Yes, I'm going to give away my age. In the 80s, I started to watch English soccer, and I was turned into a big Liverpool fan because they were the best team, and I was like 8 years old. So why not follow the best team, right?
Yeah.
So Liverpool were the best team at that point, and once I pick a team, there's no turning back. I mean, this thing can tank for 30 years running. I'm that guy following that team.
Yeah.
So I'm a Liverpool fan, thick or thin, and that really sets the stage in my club soccer, club football. That's who I follow.
Yeah, you know what? It's been a good couple of years for the Liverpool supporters too. So not a bad choice.
Yes.
Did you have a favorite player growing up?
Yes, very much so. It impacted me big time. It was Diego Maradona. So if you ever laid your eyes on Diego Maradona playing soccer, whether it's on a YouTube clip or you get a chance to watch it live on TV like I did. So Saturdays were English football, and in the islands on a Sunday was Italian football. So yes, I started to follow Napoli because of Maradona. And I mean, if you ever saw this guy play, it's just mesmerizing, and he's so exciting to watch, and just sort of capture your heart when you watch him play. So Diego Maradona, first, second, and third.
Yeah, it's wild because as soon as you mention Maradona, it's like, well, you don't need anyone else on the list, basically at that point. Right. And as somebody who's a little bit younger, I obviously didn't get to see him play. I didn't get to see him play, when he was healthy, or even be able to do interviews when he was healthy, unfortunately. But seeing some of the movies and documentaries that have come out on his life, his career, it's moving. He's such an interesting character who I think is sometimes misunderstood off the pitch. But on the pitch, what a legend. Like, what struck me was his ability to build up a persona on the ground, unstoppable, untouchable, unbelievably confident, and then off the ground, very much a family guy who really sort of lost himself.
The thing with Maradona, I mean, I've studied Maradona because I was such a big fan of his. The thing with Diego and so many other athletes is that because they usually come from really poor situations where there's no other distraction. So he has all this ability, and all that he's doing is getting better at his craft, right? Because that's his only outlet in life at that point. And then he starts to excel, and this could go wrong for any athlete that comes from that area. He starts to excel, and then he becomes really famous, really great at what he does. And then he can't handle that fame and fortune because he has no support, no proper support. And also what he's seen in his life is nothing that's preparing him for that sort of fame and glory. So it usually just steamrolls them, and then they all become these jokes off the field, which is so sad to watch,
Yeah, it is sad, but it's so understandable if you've never had that experience, and going from nothing and focusing only on one thing, and then going to having everything, right?
I mean, let's be clear what we're talking about. Nothing here. I mean, Maradona's upbringing was literally the worst part of Toronto that you can think of. It was behind that door. Yeah. So that's where he came from. But we see it so often in other athletes and heroes that it's pretty common,
The only thing that I can hope is it's with all of that coming to light and we understanding this now, that it's a lesson for some of those, those people who look up
Sure.
and have those same dreams, to realize that, you know what, when you get it, you don't need to spend it. You don't need to be that celebrity. It's actually okay to just go home and hang out with your family.
Yeah, you know what too? I have to say though, I think the media, we have a part to play as well. Because as Maradona comes off the field and he gets a shower and he puts a towel over his neck, we stick a microphone in him and ask him not only about the game, but then we ask him about politics. This is just Maradona in general. We ask him about politics and everything under the sun, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially when he was in Napoli. That was the one thing that the political involvement that he didn't quite even realize he was part of, that ended up becoming it's wild.
Nuts.
So Maradona, fantastic choice. I think everyone can understand that, especially if you've ever watched the one clip of him warming up with that music in the background that's for always seen on YouTube and for all places. That's something every kid who plays the game should see. It's loving.
Yes.
He literally looks like he's the happiest he's ever been. He's just hanging out with himself, shoes untied, just having a blast. And that to me was one of those quick clips, Ryan, that dragged me into the love of football and dragged me into loving soccer and wanting to get involved. It's just there's a beauty to it. And it's really hard to describe what you see when you see it, other than to say, look, that's a beautiful game. Watch it. Why aren't you watching it? Right.
And I tell you something else about soccer. Someone's personality, the way that they are off the field, it comes to light literally within 5 minutes of them playing soccer. You can see if they're a distributor, if they're a sharer, somebody who's more adventurous, will take on people, somebody who's willing to, a defender, a goalkeeper, willing to protect, willing to save. It literally comes to light in 5 minutes on the field. You could just walk onto the field anywhere in Canada and see a pickup game, look at somebody on the field for 5 minutes, and you'll have a pretty good outline of what sort of personality they are. It's
Absolutely.
crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's so true. That's a great little tidbit. So we talked a little bit about how, you're a fan of Liverpool. What other sports do you follow? Do you have any other sports that you follow actively?
Yeah. And weirdest thing. So I got a chance to come to college in Florida when I was 20. So up until then, I was playing cricket U19 trials. So I was trying to get onto the Trinidad and Tobago U19 cricket team. It did work out, and I got the opportunity to come to college, which I'm so thankful for. But when I came to the US in the mid-90s, there was no way of watching cricket. So what I did is looked at the other bat and ball sport, which is baseball. And it quickly, the comparisons were so close that people don't realize that I started to really follow baseball. And I really started to like it a lot. I got a team, the Boston Red Sox, and I started to follow that team. And yes, through thick or thin, that's my team. And I really started to get into it, and I could relate to it because the bat and ball sports are so close together on and off the field. So I follow baseball.
It's really interesting. I know folks who are big fans of cricket, and whenever I mention, I watched a little baseball, there was almost a little bit of a disappointment because I haven't given cricket a shot yet. But it's interesting because there is a lot of kind of overlay between those two sports.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. So just a quick snippet here. Just like a pitcher would try to hit the outside corner of the plate and have the batsman, flash at it. The same thing in cricket. The bowler is going to bowl just what we call outside off stump, which is the outside part of the plate, and have the batsman try to flash at it. They try to pitch or bowl in that what we call the corridor of uncertainty, if the batsman is not sure if to go after it or not. And it really comes down to a game of cat and mouse between the batter and the pitcher or bowler.
And someone, I don't know if you've ever had the chance to like, obviously you played cricket. I don't know if you had a chance to play baseball, but I grew up playing, in Western Canada, it's quite common. You play ice hockey in the winter, you're playing baseball or soccer in the summer. I chose baseball at the time because I loved pitching. There was something about that one-on-one battle with the batter.
Yeah.
It's really hard to describe to people who haven't had that or played it at a top level, but you really do become, nothing else matters. You're looking at the one guy. Yeah. You're aware, obviously, of what's going on the field, where players are positioned. But for that moment where you're really truly locked into a one-on-one battle in a team game, it's such a unique experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing about pitching as well, it really is about skill and craft. So you can build up as much as you want in the gym. You can run as fast as you want down the track and get as fit as you want. And yeah, those things will pay off just a little bit, but it's really about skill and craft and your discipline to be able to hit that spot, that one spot regularly. So I tip my hat to pitchers and bowlers where it really does come down to skill, like golf. It's skill.
So you mentioned basketball as well. What is your basketball team?
Right. So growing up in the Caribbean, the basketball package that would come down on the TV, it was the Lakers or the Celtics. Pick one. Yeah. The Lakers game or the Celtics game. So I turned into a big Magic Johnson fan. So I followed the Lakers through and through. So in the 80s, when the Lakers were the most popular, so I picked them. Of course, I was 10. And then throughout the 90s into the 2000s, I kind of dropped off of basketball a little bit because the game has changed so much. And I can't follow everything that I would like to. So it's that one had to kind of go to the wayside a bit. But I'm a little disappointed on my Lakers team. They're really starting to just bring everybody on like it's some sort of all-star joke. So it's taken away that sort of organic feel to it. So I'm kind of disappointed.
Yeah, they really are the retirement home franchise of the NBA right now. And it's going to go one way or the other, in my opinion. It's either going to go, they're going to have a great season and they're going to show everybody all that experience, or they're going to have injuries galore throughout the season and they're never going to get set. One of the two.
People don't realize there's only one basketball. You can have 4 all-stars, but only one ball to share. So that becomes too many Chiefs and not enough Indians.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
You know?
So, basketball, football, love it. What are you looking for? This is just a curious question. What are you looking for from Liverpool this year? Obviously, there's been some really interesting transfers for other teams. Chelsea, Man City looking very, very strong. But you have Van Dijk back, which is fantastic.
Yes.
What do you think? What do you think Liverpool is going to end up with this year? Back to Champions League? Are they going to fight for the title?
They're going to be in the top 4. It's going to be, I know everyone's thinking this, that it's going to be just a couple points separating Man City, Chelsea, United, and Liverpool, because I say that on depth of squad. So I think City just is just so much deeper. They still have the best coach, as good as Chelsea have been, and how good is their roster and their coaches now. I just think the Pep Guardiola style of football, it just lends itself to winning 3 points more often than your style of play. So in a cup game, you can beat Pep Guardiola, sure. You can beat him 1-0 in the Champions League final, right? You could out-scheme Pep for 90 minutes. But in a 38-game race, Manchester City are going to accumulate more points than your team. And it's really hard to combat that. So I think with Liverpool, and I'm a very harsh critic of my own teams, I love Jurgen Klopp. I love his idea of football. I love him as a man manager. But his one Achilles heel is his naivety in the transfer market. He loves to build a group and really get emotional with that group, get the most out of that group, which he does. He'll take an orange and squeeze just as much juice as somebody has 2 oranges, right? With his 1 orange. But I think injuries are a reality in soccer. And I think that's going to catch up to Liverpool, and that's going to eventually not allow them to compete, at least in the top 2.
Interesting. So, yeah, I always like to ask, because I think, that asking someone what they think their team is going to do is a question absolutely filled with bias. But I love asking it anyway, because we all have hopes and dreams, right? So
yes.
Let's move into how you got into sports journalism, how you got into commentary. Sure. So you mentioned that you came here or came to the States for college. What was it that you took originally?
Well, I got to go way before that. When I was watching English soccer on a Saturday, I would literally take my ball outside, and the big commentator at that time was John Motson. So John Motson would finish doing the FA Cup game, and I'd just have his voice in my head. And I would go outside and I'd kick the ball against the wall to like Ian Rush or Kenny Dalglish. And I would call the game while I'm shooting the ball. Lovely pass by Dalglish. And there's Rush, sliding in his 10th goal of the season. So I would start from that age. I was 7 years old. And when I would play cricket, someone who was very close to my family, who's also a very big cricket commentator, his name is Tony Cozier. He passed away, but he was he's a legendary West Indian commentator. So I would actually practice commentating when I'm playing cricket, and so that love was always there. But growing up in a conservative home in the Caribbean, it's not always the best choice to go and follow sports broadcasting when you only have limited opportunities on an island. Mm-hmm. So I did, when I got the chance to go to college, I did what any responsible kid will do. I did marketing management, a lot of advertising and so on, which is great. I love that too. But as time went on, there's this fire inside of me that was relentless, and I would not be able to let it go until I pursued it. And that was being a commentator, a sports broadcaster, a show host, any of those things, all of the above. So I had to follow through on it, and it's been a heck of a journey.
Yeah, that is very cool, because I actually, it's funny, my real world job is marketing. I'm a project manager in that world, so I have to laugh a little bit, because as much as I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy working in teams in a professional environment, there's always that little itch of, man, the dream is something else, right? And it's very cool to hear that from you, Ryan, because I think it's something a lot of us don't do often. You obviously an exception, but people get locked into a career and they think those things are in the past. They're still there. You can still chase them. You can still make it happen, right? And it's very
Absolutely cool. A great Canadian by the name of Jim Carrey. He has an amazing clip, and I listen to it all the time. He said, you have a better chance of failing at something that you don't want to do at failing at something that you do want to do. So if you're going to fail, may as well fail at doing something that you want to do, because you have a better chance of succeeding doing that. So I took that to heart. I listen to that clip every month, every time I need some motivation that, man, this is not going as well as I wanted to. I listen to that. I get back on the horse and I go again.
It's a really good choice too, because Jim Carrey is someone I think that a lot of people don't realize that he worked very, very hard to get where he is. And there were times that he was working jobs that none of us would imagine him now. He was a janitor. He was all sorts of things before he was popular. And there's a guy you can look at who he was in his late 20s before he really became known. And I always like this little tidbit. I don't know if you know this, but his big movie was The Mask, right? Everyone thought that The Mask was the big movie, even though Ace Ventura came out before. The funny little tidbit there, and I believe this is true. Hopefully I'm not going to lie on a recorded show here, but The Mask was recorded 2 years before he did Ace Ventura. It took a very long time for them to do the special effects. So it ended up being kind of serendipitous, and it worked out for him really, really well. It's just one of those things that always sticks out in my mind. Anyway, random comment.
Yeah, I love it.
So you did marketing when you went to school. What was your first opportunity to dive into that burning kind of desire that you had? Were you working in kind of the marketing world and finding a niche there, or were you working on your own outside, still trying to chase the dream?
I was just working with a company, paying the bills. I enjoyed the job. It's a food distribution company. The company would bring foods down from the UK and bring them down to Orlando, Florida, which has a huge tourist base and expats from the UK. So I'll be the representative to get these UK foods out into these stores like Target, Walmart, Publix, which is our big grocery store down here. Make sure they have that British selection. And it was really, really good. I was on the road all the time, in my 20s, early 30s, loving it. But as I got later on in my 30s, closer to my 40s, to around 40, I really, really could not ignore the feeling of following through on my dream, becoming a sports broadcaster. So I put it out there in the universe. I put it out there to my friends. I told them what I wanted to do, who I always was inside as a person. They understood that. And it's amazing when you put something out there and you come to that conclusion, your brain starts to figure out pathways in how to achieve this goal. whether subconsciously or consciously. So you can be driving down the road or reading an article or listening to a conversation, and that the subject matter in your head, which is sports broadcasting, little words, snippets, or names would spark something of how you can achieve that goal. So when you put it out there, it's the best thing you can do. So I did that, and I got a feedback. Hey, one of my friends, they could put you onto somebody. I know somebody in sports broadcasting. So this guy had a basketball league that he put together for the youths, and somebody told him about me. So he said, "Well, bring him in for this interview." So I came in there, and I was so nervous. I was so scared. He asked before I come in to do a clip on basketball. He said, "Just look at any game and just give me 5 minutes of a call." So I did that, and I put it on my iPhone. And he took my iPhone, and he pressed play, and he turned around, so he couldn't see me. All he could hear was the audio. And when he turned around, I was like dripping with sweat, with nerves. Okay,
Yeah.
This is like a charity gig. This is just like a freebie. This is like volunteer work. He turns back around, and he said to me, "I really like how you sound. You really have something there." And he's like, "Dude, why are you sweating so much?" I'm so nervous. You know what I mean? So he didn't understand. That was my dream. This is my dream. Inside of me, this is make or break for me. This is like everything for me. For him, this is like some guy he just needs capable enough to call a game for some youths who would have no idea who's calling the game or if they're calling the game. So, but it was for me, it was for everything. So I got the gig, and that was my first gig calling a basketball youth game. The announcing, in comes in Jeremy, number 25. Jeremy comes from this high school, whatever. I'll just be doing that all day long. And it turned out to be really good. So I got invited back ever since. So that means I did a good job.
That's awesome. And I feel you though, like even people don't realize that sometimes even things that you do for fun, because you're so invested and you're so like, oh, this could be a step. Like I would compare that to me doing interviews on this pod where I'm nervous for no reason other than just being nervous because it's someone I haven't met or talked to before, right? And quite often people are like, "Oh, you look a little nervous." I'm like, "Well, what did you expect me to be?" But that is a really like honest and heartwarming story, you know, that there is a bit of fear that's involved with chasing your dream, and there's going to be those moments where you're sweating in a chair hoping to hear something good, right? So that's awesome.
My dad always told me, like, when I would go to play sports, whatever sport it was, it could be a final, cricket, soccer, whatever, he would always say to me, nerves are a good thing. It's a sign that you want to do well for yourself. He will never pick somebody on his team who wasn't nervous. That means that person doesn't really care. They don't want to do well. He wants the guy that would be nervous and wants to do well in the game and prove to himself that they want to do well. So nerves are a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of times, you know, the words anxiety gets mixed in with anticipation, and sometimes it's not anxiety. It's just part of the moment of what's going to happen. Correct. Right.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Was there any goals, games that you covered in your kind of commentary career that you will never forget, that something that you will always cherish or share when anyone asks you about your time commentating?
I do the Tampa Bay Rowdies as an analyst, not play-by-play. I work for them, and I've seen some really good games. But there was a game last season in the playoffs when a guy whose name is Lucky Mkusana. Lucky, believe it or not. And he's coming off the bench, and he's known as a super sub. He's just lucky. And he comes off the bench. The Rowdies are really pressuring this team. It's against Charleston. Charleston beat them twice already in the season. So, Lang Stadium in St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay area, everyone's sweating because they're nervous as well. It's coming out to the last 10 minutes. Lucky Mkusana comes onto the field, and so happens. Lucky gets a hold of a header, tucks it away in a corner. The entire crowd goes crazy. I go crazy. I almost grab the play-by-play guy and have him like in a chokehold as he tries to make the call. You know, so I'll always remember that moment. It's just one of those organic human moments that you just allow yourself to give into. So I'll always remember that.
How long have you been working for the Tampa Bay Rowdies? Speaking of a soccer club or a football club that has a history and has been around for
Yes,
quite some time, and quite often gets overshadowed by the MLS clubs that play nearby. But I think most people know about the Rowdies. It's one of those things that, even in the football manager community, people
yes,
love the Rowdies. Like there's something with the USL clubs, right? So how long have you worked
yes.
for them?
For the last 3 seasons. So it's been a great ride. And that's where I got my first real gig, working for the Tampa Bay Rowdies as a color analyst. So what an organization. Really, really great team of people off the field and on the field. And their brand is so strong. It's so organic. And I keep using that word. It's so grassroots when it comes to US soccer. They've been around forever. Even when Pele was playing in his
Yeah.
NASL days, he was playing against the Rowdies. And everyone, they've stood the test of time, And I think people respect that.
Especially in the North American markets. If a club can stay through the ups and downs, the collapse and
Yes,
creation of multiple leagues, and the fact
yes,
that the NASL, I had a chance to interview a player who played for FC Edmonton during the NASL days, the last rendition of the NASL, and it's
yes,
just a wild league. Like, just the concept of the travel, and then the financial differences between the clubs in it. You have the Cosmos spending whatever they can find, going
yes.
crazy, versus the rest of the league. It was a wild league.
We talk about travel, like you just mentioned. So all these big leagues in the world, Italian, English, um, Dutch, Spain, France, Germany, these are all relatively medium to small countries. Imagine having a league in the US.
Yeah.
It is such a large scale of area to cover. Steven Gerrard came over here and he said, "You all don't understand. The travel to play in this league is ridiculous. I'm sweating my what off here in LA. Then I go up to Colorado and it's freezing cold up in the mountains. Then I go across to the East Coast over in Maine and it's freezing. It's just such a big, large mass of area to cover and to play a league,
Yeah. It's wild. It's one of the things I love sharing with people. The Canadian Premier League, which started 3 years ago, there's a team in Halifax on the East Coast, and there's a team in Victoria, BC on Vancouver Island, and they're the
Yeah.
longest domestic away game in the world. It's hard to explain to someone that's a 6.5 hour flight just to go
Oh,
and have an away day. Well, depending on which
God.
way you're going, it's faster one way
Yeah.
than the other, but that's a long flight.
Big. Yeah. And
um,
these guys who come over from Europe, they're expecting a 1 hour flight, maybe.
yeah.
So
What do you mean the away day is like we need to actually go to the plane and the day before, right? Like it's such a weird concept
yes,
for people when they come over, for sure. But that being said, it's as somebody who is desperate to see leagues work, throughout North America, distance is one of those things that it's a unique factor over here. You're never going to have the away days where I can drive 30 minutes or take a bus for 20 minutes to go have another game in the same league. It's always going to be all right, this weekend I'm going to go grab a hotel, we'll go see the game, and then I'm going to go back
yeah,
home, right? So
correct.
so couple of last questions before we wrap up. I'm just curious. So commentating games during
When I
the
use,
pandemic.
sorry, go ahead.
Wondering what it is like to commentate a game remotely, for the most part. A lot of games I think you're probably doing remotely these days. Is that not true?
Well, it's so funny that you asked that. I'm going to show you real quick. Hang on to your hairnets. Here we go. So I'm just going to turn around right here. And this is for tomorrow. Yep. See all this madness?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So tomorrow, I'm actually making my debut on NISA, in the NISA League, National Independent Soccer League Association in the US. We're it's a really big game tomorrow, and this is the first time I'm calling a game in my house. It's going to be very unique for sure, but it's a definite difference from calling a game remotely in a studio in your house as compared to being at the stadium, because as human beings we don't realize it, we really give off energy If you ever walk into a mall or a gym, you can feel the energy from people, literally, if you close your eyes. So there's a big difference when you're doing work like this on your own or being in and around people.
Yeah, it must be really challenging to try and capture the atmosphere of what it would be like at the event when you're sitting at
Yeah,
home, comfortable in your living room.
yeah, yes, it really is.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to take your mind and put yourself in the stadium, and don't allow your mind to stray. That you're back in the that you're in a studio. You know.
So the NISL game, who is part of that? If I remember correctly, I think a lot of the NISL games are actually available for free, if I remember correctly, to be able to catch it. So are we going to be able to watch that?
Yeah, I think so. It changed to NISA, so it's NISA, NISA.
NISA, got it.
Yes, association. Yes, it's going to be on beIN Sports, so that'll be in the North America, I believe, North American market.
Yep.
And then if you go to the NISA website or YouTube, you should be able to pick it up there as well.
Yeah, because I have actually caught a few games of a friend who lives in Indianapolis, and he is obsessed with a lot of the lower levels, and he loves to show me teams I've never heard of, show me games that are on that I've have not had the chance to see, and that's what I loved. A lot of people, you can see all the big games, all the big leagues, all you want, but I think it's really fun to be able to catch games where it's truly a town shuts down, everybody goes to see the game, right? There's a certain vibe that's really enjoyable about that.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the Canadian star himself, Alphonso Davies, and he started off, I believe, in Montreal. Was it Montreal?
He actually was Vancouver. So he actually started in Edmonton, was where his family grew up, and he got identified by the Whitecaps and brought into their academy at a young age. I couldn't remember what age, but they got a good one.
So, that's just another example of that sort of talent lingering in the lower leagues, sometimes not discovered. And also, because of the salary caps, at least I know in the MLS, because of the salary caps, if you're an owner of a team and you only have a certain amount of money to spend, there will be people dropping through the gaps that you can't afford to pay that will be really good, a good player, but you already filled that roster already, and you don't have that money to pay that player. So they go down into the USL or the NISA, and you have these really talented players down there.
Yeah, and it's something we've seen a lot of. Like Canadian Premier League is sort of in that conversation now, where you're seeing players who may jump back and forth between the USL Championship or USL League One. And what's really cool is I think if you look at the NISA, the USL and the Canadian Premier League, every single year the quality seems to improve across all of those leagues, and all that's doing is helping build a better base. And we're not going to lose a talent that might develop a year later than he was expected to, or something like that, right?
Because they could actually make a living playing the game,
Yeah, exactly.
I think the coverage is such a big deal. ESPN Plus down here in the US has been doing a really good job of really covering all these, well, the USL especially, covering these leagues and allowing the platform to be taken seriously. And that really just dribbles down into the field of play,
Absolutely. And as somebody who lives outside of the States, the best thing the USL ever did, and I think loads of leagues could learn from this, put your games on YouTube for free in the markets that you don't have an agreement to show it. You're not going to make or lose any money out of that. Just throw it on YouTube. I get to watch all the USL games. It's great.
That's awesome. You're one click away. That's great.
Exactly. Well, I really do appreciate you coming on the show today, Ryan. This has been a fantastic conversation. I think that not only I've enjoyed it, but I'm sure that anyone who's listening or will take part in the pod when it's released will absolutely love your story. It's a unique adventure that you've had. And it's still continuing, and I love it. I think that's what life is all about, is grabbing those opportunities, sweating it out for a moment, and realizing that you're on the path to that dream, right? So
correct. And I hope the same for you as well. You're doing an amazing job. I mean, you're so professional as a host, so please continue what you're doing.
Hey, I appreciate it. You know what? I always say to folks, it's a lot like running a large meeting in a marketing office. It's about sitting down and kind of making sure everyone has a chance to communicate and have their say. So really do appreciate it. Where can people find you, Ryan, if they want to get connected with you? Is it Twitter the best place to find you?
Twitter is still the best place. I do a terrible job in letting people know what I'm doing next. So I promise I'll be better in showing some games. I do the UCF game tonight, University of Central Florida. That's on ESPN Plus. So I'll be doing that this evening. Then I have the NISA tomorrow. Hopefully you guys can find it there. And I will put it on Twitter. So if anybody is trying to find me, it's not only Ryan Davis at COYR, but I also have Red Sox Ryan 13.
Red Sox Ryan 13. And as a Jays fan, I'll forgive you. No, you know what? It's funny. I joke about this. Last little comment. The AL East is one of those divisions where it's amazing. It's hard not to be frustrated because every team for the most part is good except Baltimore, as we know.
What about the Rays? The Rays own the Rowdies, by the way. So I get to talk a lot to Rays owners and Rays people. I mean, they play Moneyball. They do Moneyball like nobody else's business. Yeah. It's amazing. Fantastic.
It's incredible, the Rays, because every year as a Jays fan, we go, is this the year the Rays their deals won't work out? And they somehow make trades, bring in a great roster of guys who aren't making that much money and compete for the division or a wild card spot every single year. It's impressive. And it's something that anyone who loves a sport where money dominates should be excited to see clubs that are still able to do that and outthink the big budget players like the Red Sox or the Jays or the Yankees.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you very much for being here, Ryan. It's been a great conversation. As always, guys, you can find him, Ryan Davis, COYR, on Twitter, as well as Red Sox Ryan, was it as well?
Red Sox Ryan 13.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ryan. Have a great rest of your Friday, and good luck on the UCF game later today.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope to speak to you soon.
Absolutely. Talk soon.
Bye.
That was Ryan Davis. He's a commentator, a sports fan, as well as a former marketer, which is very, very cool. So thank you very much for Ryan and Tristan joining the show today. It's been a really great episode. Thank you very much for listening, and all the best. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your time with me. You can find all the previous episodes on your favorite podcast app just by searching ScootTalks Sports. You can also find us on YouTube if you're interested in watching the old video on demand. But hey, this episode's recorded live on Twitch Sports, and you can actually be part of the episode by following at twitch.tv/SCOOTR. That's Scooter. And joining us on Monday and Fridays at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can always connect with me on Discord, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want to find out all the ways and all the links, just go to Twitter, search _SCOOTR, and you can find my profile and click on the link. Let's talk soon. Thanks again so much for listening.